Pixel 7 Pro is fresh out the lab and I've been using it for about a week now. Typically, I daily my S22 Ultra and my iPhone 14 Pro, and my experience has been somewhat interesting, but I can tell you that Google, this time around, has taken this flagship seriously. New camera system, brighter display, new Tensor chip, and a price point that should have all the competition worried. The S22 Ultra in particular stands out, seeing how it's an Android and $300 more than the Pixel 7 Pro, which kicks off at 900 buckaroos for that base model. This time around though, most of the bugs that we experienced last year are somewhat gone. The phone feels and looks much more premium, and the battery life takes a jab at every other flagship that's out right now. For this base version, you get 128 gigs with 12 gigs of RAM, which you can upgrade to 512 for $1,100, which compared to the S22 Ultra and iPhone 14 Pro is somewhat cheaper when it comes to storage options. Now, I would like to start off with design since we do have some changes. As you guys can see, I went with the Snow White version this time around, which may or may not be my first white phone that I've picked up in over a decade. The camera bar now is metal and it seamlessly blends in with the rest of the phone, which, by the way, when you set this on a desk, in comparison to the S22 Ultra and iPhone 14 Pro, you could actually scroll through your feed and not have to worry about the phone wobbling all over the place. The phone weighs just over 7 ounces, which in comparison to the iPhone 14 Pro and S22 Ultra is somewhat lighter, and you'll notice that the first time you pick this thing up. It does also feel somewhat slippery, and at the same time, it likes picking up dust around that metal bar, so make sure you throw a case or skin on this thing if you plan on picking one up. For its display, you have 6.7 inches with Quad HD Plus resolution, sporting 1440p and 120Hz. Which, by the way, make sure you turn that on when you set this phone up for the first time. Now, as far as peak brightness is concerned, it still falls behind the S22 Ultra and the iPhone 14 Pro, but at the same time, compared to last year's model, there is somewhat of an improvement, which you guys will notice, especially in direct sunlight. One thing I'd also like to mention is it does tend to produce a lot more glare when you're outside in comparison to the S22 Ultra and the iPhone 14 Pro, which is something I really haven't had to worry about lately. And then you have color accuracy and reproduction, which are far better with the iPhone and S22 Ultra. And I like to think it looks by far the best on the Samsung. But at the same time, it's not knocking the Pixel. It still looks amazing even if it's not better than both of those other phones. Getting into the beefier stuff, we have the new 7 Pro camera system, which sports a triple camera setup. You have a 50 megapixel main sensor, 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and then you now have a 48 megapixel telephoto camera that has a 5x optical zoom. On the front, you have a 10.8 megapixel selfie camera, which is decent during the day, but does need some work at nighttime. I mostly stacked this thing up against my iPhone 14 Pro since I did take the SIM on my S22 Ultra to daily this phone. As you can see, both provide tons of detail in images. However, the computational photography from the Pixel has really gained a nice bump over last year. Now, I can't tell you how many times I took a photo with the Pixel and thought to myself, man, that looks like shit, only to realize that the software completely redesigned the photo and made it look amazing after the fact. Now, at nighttime, I'd say the iPhone 14 Pro still has its advantage here, larger sensor, better camera system. Now, if you're not looking for vibrance and color, I'd say the Pixel is right there neck and neck with it because it does provide a ton of sharpness and detail in those lower light photos. But it seems like the iPhone captures a lot more vibrance, color, light, to where it makes the image look somewhat more natural. But at the same time, the Google Pixel still held its own. Now, I also noticed that with the iPhone, in most images, I got a ton more in terms of color, and it seemed much more appealing and rich to the eye in comparison to the Pixel, even at different focal lengths. I also took a few portrait photos with both of these phones, along with checking out the selfie camera. For me, I like the iPhone just a tad bit more since the photos seem to have a ton more vibrance and life to them. But then, at the same time, the Pixel on the other hand provides sharper images in some of those photos, so this made for an interesting comparison. Let me know down below which one you think looked better. But now, let's get into video. Thanks to ProRes, the iPhone has been my go-to for the past few years, even over the S22 Ultra, but Pixel isn't so far behind anymore. 2 new features with the Pixel 7 Pro this year are Google's version of cinematic mode and active stabilization. With cinematic blur, the Pixel keeps its focus on the subject while it blurs out the background, and it does this at 24 FPS, which we all know is the wrong frame rates. When it came to active stabilization, I think Apple's action mode is better. However, it's nice to see Google adding this to their flagship for those that need footage stabilized in their videos. This does, however, take the phone out of 4K and it drops it to full HD, which the same concept happens with 10-bit HDR. 4K 60 drops to 4K 30, which is the correct frame rate. 10-bit HDR and 30 FPS also looked really good with the Pixel 7 Pro. Here it is in comparison to the iPhone 14 Pro. Next up, let's cover performance. This new Tensor chip is a significant upgrade over last year. Not only is this thing more powerful, but it offers a ton more in terms of machine learning and AI, which you see not only when shooting photos, but also with speech recognition and a ton of other tasks. Not bad. Geekbench scores in comparison to the iPhone 14 Pro were far behind in both single and multi-core scores. As you can see, 1060 in comparison to the 1888 you get with the iPhone 14 Pro on the single-core CPU test, and 3046 compared to 5465 I got with my iPhone 14 Pro on the multi-core test. Even though it wasn't as powerful as the iPhone, I didn't really notice too much in my everyday use. What I did notice is how much better the battery life was on the Pixel over the iPhone 14 Pro. Sporting 5000 milliamps, it puts this thing neck and neck with the S22 Ultra, and I consistently reached days where my battery life was above 40% even after heavy use. And I mean heavy use. A lot of this also has to do with how much better this new G2 Tensor chip optimizes the phone. For charging, the Pixel supports 30 watt fast charging, which is also better than the iPhone, even though in this particular case it's the iPhone who needs it more than the Pixel. The software also sees a nice new list of features, even though it is somewhat similar to last year. Now, in many cases, we saw what the 6 Pro was capable of last year, being able to remove subjects from your photos and such. However, this time around, it offers an unblur feature that works on your photos you've taken years ago. Any photo in your library that's blurry instantly comes to life. Thanks to Call Assist Suite, you can now also screen calls before you answer them to avoid these pesky scammers, where the scammer has to reveal themselves to you, which you can hear and see in real time. And you also have a hold for me feature, which your Pixel will wait on hold for you until someone comes to the phone. It even has the option to direct your call before you hear options for it, so you don't have to wait through a whole menu of prompts to get through to someone. Now that's pretty convenient. Google Assistant, on the other hand, has now become my favorite and has become noticeably better over last year thanks to this new Tensor chip. You get 5 years of security patches and only 3 years of platform updates with this Android, in comparison to 4+ years you get with the S22 Ultra and other Samsung devices, which doesn't really make the most sense seeing how Google owns the chipset now. Really? The Air Force decides to fly over when I'm filming? I can finally say with confidence that the S22 Ultra has a worthy adversary for a lot cheaper. Now, is it better than the S22 Ultra? No, I still would take my Samsung over this phone. But now we have another Android on the list that's just as good up there and probably one of the best Androids out in the market, right next to the Samsung. Is it perfect? No, it still lags a little bit. There are bugs. It does feel somewhat clickier than last year. Some people might prefer that. For me, the S22 Ultra does feel a lot more premium, but at the same time, this phone is a lot lighter, so it's kind of give or take. So I'm kind of curious to know what you guys think though. Would you pick this up or the S22 Ultra, or are you team iPhone? Let me know down below where you'll also find the links to everything that we covered in today's episode. If you want to see more, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Detroit Fury. And if you enjoyed this content, please make sure you smash that like button for me, subscribe, turn on your post notifications. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in my next episode. Peace.